Everyone says how horrible it will be to renovate or build your house. We're here to say it doesn't have to be that way. Join 3 seasoned architects as they interview homeowners who recently completed a large project and ask them one simple question. What do you know now that you wish you knew before you started? Welcome to Home, the Second Story podcast.
Welcome to Home, the Second Story. We're 3 residential architects sharing real conversations with homeowners who've taken on custom home or renovation projects. If you haven't already, check out our first episode to hear more about us and why we're doing this. I'm Taylor Davis from TPD Architect in Birmingham, Alabama, and today I am joined by my co-hosts.
I'm Sheri Scott with Springhouse Architects in Cincinnati, Ohio.
And I'm Marilyn Moedinger of Runcible Studios in Lancaster, Pennsylvania and Boston, Massachusetts. Today, we're doing something a little different. It's just the 3 of us, no guests, because here's the thing. There's no one-size-fits-all process when it comes to designing and building a custom home. So we're going to share a little bit about how each of us works, what's similar, what's different, and what we think makes for the best possible experience. So before we dive into the specifics, it seems to make sense to talk about what is generally how an architect works. Like how does this work? So basically, an architect is in charge of creating the drawings and the specifications that tell the contractor what to price and what to build. So that's it. There's a whole wide variety of ways that might happen, from just buying some plans from the internet up to and including full service where the architect is helping you pick out absolutely everything. But the architect's role is to take on that design process as well as all the things that go with it, understanding code, zoning, all that kind of stuff, as well as the design and technical aspects. So I think we should just dive in. I mean, that's the basics, right? So, and I think we'll continue to explore and explain how that stuff works generally. But why don't we dive in?
You will generally find most architects, whether it's commercial or residential, follow a sort of design process that goes from big decisions to small decisions. They may call it different things. Their phases may be named differently, but the way it generally works design-wise is we find out what you've got, then we move to like bigger decisions and we filter our way down to smaller decisions. So regardless of who you're working with, and like I said, there may be some different ways, and we can talk a little bit about how we sort of put those chunks of decision-making processes together. But I think that's kind of in conjunction with the set of instructions for the contractor, it's really about it's a sort of roadmap for decision-making too.
That's a great add. I think it's important to say that a big part of what we're doing is not just drawing sort of in isolation, but we're collaborating with owners. We're helping them through a bunch of really complicated decisions. So it doesn't just draw itself. And each line on the paper is many, 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 many decisions that have to be made.
And that it's a process that we've been through a lot of times. And while every custom home, as in the name, everyone is custom, everyone is different, we still have a process that we work through with each client.
Yeah. So the first step in that process is kind of what we call pre-design, schematic design, kind of carrying us up to the point where we can get initial contractor bids. So, from that very first introductory conversation with an owner up to the first design ideas, up to maybe we're sort of getting, those initial bids from contractors. How do you guys do that?
It really starts for us with the very first sit down, kind of meet and greet, finding out from the client what they need from us, what their expectations are, where they are in the process. Everyone comes in a little bit differently. And depending on how they found us, did they find us through a referral? Do they love one of our projects? Did they find us on Google, which surprisingly a lot of our clients do? So we find out all of that. And in that first meeting, which I think it's different for a lot of different professionals, but we don't charge for that meeting because it's just as much for us to find out about the homeowner as it is for the homeowner to find out about us. And we take an hour and we talk about what they want to do. Like I said, their expectations, if they've ever worked with an architect before, if they're brand new to all of this, it all kind of depends where you start on the path. Once we've done all of that and we have an accepted contract, which could be a whole other episode here that we can talk through, We usually have another meeting with the homeowners talking about very specific things. But like Taylor said, in a broad sense, like how many bedrooms? What's your square footage? What's your budget? We work through all of those questions, and then we take it back on our side in our office and come up with some designs. Sometimes we come up with one design, sometimes we come up with three. Again, it goes back to kind of those expectations and understanding that it is an artistic process. And sometimes there is one solution that we want to get in front of you. We try to get that first design in front of you very quickly as a sketch, as a model. It just depends how it's going in the office to what we put in front of you at the very first meeting.
Fairly similar to Sheri in a lot of respects. I mean, I think there's an information gathering phase at the outset where, especially because we do a lot of additions and renovations, we're trying to gather as much information as possible. So we're getting surveys, we're coming and scanning the house to get some base drawings done. We're looking at zoning, like we're doing sort of this information gathering to find out kind of what the actual physical parameters are. But then we're also doing these conversations, whether that's in person, sometimes it's on Pinterest with like and loathe boards or surveys or whatever, questionnaires, to try and get like, what are your parameters? Like, what are our homeowners' parameters? So there's like this information gathering. And we actually have a little separate process that we do at the outset of most of our projects. We call it project definition. Sometimes we both put it into pre-design if we know we're doing a project, but it's meant to address the kind of like hand waving phase that most people do when they walk through their houses. They're like, we're thinking this
over
could
here.
Be this. So we could do this over here. And so what we want to do really quickly is get a sense of what the square footages are that we're talking about, what kind of levels of finishes there are, and kind of put some numbers around that. And I actually call it a come to Jesus spreadsheet because it really is the moment where we say, okay, we're going to define the scope. Before we've drawn anything, we want to know exactly kind of what the roadmap is for how we're going to get to our end point. And it doesn't make sense for us to keep designing stuff that you don't want to pay for. So that alignment very early, very, very early, literally before we have drawn a wall, is a really important part of our process, because I think there can be oftentimes, if people haven't done construction before, they don't know how much things are going to cost. So understanding how what you want to do aligns with how much you want to invest, I think is a really important conversation to have very early. So our schematic design process builds from that point on, but we've already established a scope and kind of a general framework of where we think the construction budget is relative to what the homeowners want to do.
I love that you do that, Taylor, and especially because you do mostly renovations. I think in my business, we do mostly ground up, and there's more rule of thumb for ground up construction that we can do based on square footage and what we know they're going to want in their home. But I think with renovation, there are just so many unknowns, and for you to get your eyes on the project and then give your professional opinion before you start designing that's a great service.
We do almost all renovations in the Boston area in particular, because everything's already built. So we're working on typically old homes and old buildings. And same thing, we have a process like that as well. One thing that we do that's a little bit different than a lot of folks is we actually do our own existing conditions drawings. So we go in, because these houses are wonky and there's not a straight line in the whole place, we go in and we actually measure them ourselves. And it's a time for us to really get to know the house. When you're dealing with a renovation, especially with really tight parameters, and I might have a 2,200 square foot townhouse on 4 floors that I have to fit 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, a family room, a kitchen. Like we've got to work some magic, and that means that I have to know about every inch. And for us, that is not just measuring; it's also, for lack of a better word, sort of communing with the space, like being in there and kind of feeling it.
Oh, Marilyn, our woo-woo architect friend.
I know. Yeah, just, I can talk about construction and also woo-woo stuff, like whatever we need. But that's actually a big part of it, because buildings reveal their secrets and reveal their moments for opportunity, sometimes slowly, like not on your timeline. and you're being architect or owner. And that's what I also want to add about owners who have lived in the house for a while, have all sorts of insights that I want to gather.
Right.
That's both a plus and a minus, right? Like if they've been in there for a while, they might be really trapped and like, well, this has to be like this because that's the way it has been for the last 15 years we've lived here. But then also they have a lot of insights that might be really useful. Like, hey, yeah, I know we can't remove this wall because there's like 3 pipes going in it. And I'm saying, well, actually we're redoing all the plumbing, so we can't move that or whatever.
Right.
But our goal is to, and I think all of us share this, is to get to what is the design and what are the basic technical aspects of this project so that we can get to an early construction estimate as fast as possible, because we don't want to be, I don't know, I'm speaking for all of us now, but I mean, you guys are nodding like, yeah, we want to get to the point where we know what this thing costs as soon as possible. Everyone's heard these horror stories about my architect drew all this stuff and that came in twice as expensive. That's not us. That's not what a good architect does. So then we get to the bidding phase. And for us, we create what we call a bid package, which has a set of schematic drawings in it. And then crucially for us, a 5-page or so single space document that explains every single aspect of the project and gives allowances, explains like, here's our strategy for HVAC, here's our strategy for electrical, here's our strategy for the structural, because we want the contractor to be able to get all of that information and be on the same page. Like if we're getting 3 different bids, we want them to all be thinking the same thing. Like, this is the level of finish we're looking for. This is the technical aspects or the structural aspects. So that's a big part of what we're doing in these as early as we can here in these phases.
I'm going to jump in real quick because I think that's interesting, because when you bring up bidding, I think all of us do it differently. And I think we could do a whole show about
we should do a whole show about it.
We should do a whole show about
yeah.
it. But I think there are lots of different approaches to it, and it really kind of depends on where you are, on the contractors that you're working with, whether or not you've been working with the same contractors forever. Like we try not to bid projects. We try to do a request for qualifications for projects. So we give them, similar to Marilyn, a sort of project précis, I guess, which is a set of drawings and a set of preliminary specs that they can use for sort of understanding the project. But we ask our homeowners to develop with us a list of questions of the things that are important to them for the contractors that they are working with.
Yeah, it's not just about the number, right?
No,
it's not just about the number.
I mean, we've had people say, look, we really want somebody who's going to feed the dog while we're gone. And that, that's actually an important question to ask. Like, it's not kind of a stupid thing. So getting an alignment, Ava Abramovitz called it front end alignment, and sort of figuring out who the right fit is at the beginning of a job. And we're all kind of in that realm, like finding it out at the beginning. We only ask generally one person to provide pricing after that RFQ process goes through, figuring that we can kind of run numbers afterwards and sort of make adjustments where we need to if we've got a team that's providing us pricing information early and often and continuously is kind of the goal.
Yeah. And Taylor, I think our process is a little more like yours. Again, we do ground up construction. So there are only so many general contractors in our area that can do the level of home that we design. So that's our first service to our client, is to say, you probably want to talk to these 3 or 4, just have an informal meeting with them, go through a house that they've done, talk to them, see if you like them, because you need to like them, because you won't like them 100% of the time the entire way through. So if you can at least start out liking them, you're better off. So the personality is really important. Sometimes we go on those meetings, sometimes we don't, but at those meetings, we do ask them, what was your latest square foot cost project? And we're not necessarily looking for a hard number there to use as a calculation. We're looking for how they answer that question and how informed they will answer that question. And then after those meetings, instead of asking them to bid on the project, which honestly contractors around here will not do. They won't take the time to do a full bid. Then we narrow it down to one person, ask for a full bid, but we haven't signed a contract yet. So if that comes in way off where we think it should be, we still have the opportunity to talk to other people.
Yeah.
Getting all that established, and I'm really glad you guys brought up, because we're in different parts of the country. And we say that at the beginning of the podcast, not just for I mean, it's part of what the perspective we're bringing. And these things are very regional. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to get to that cost information or get to that, hey, what is this project? Because the next phase, we have to design it for real now. So we've got, we've got the basics now, but, knocked into place. But there's still a lot more work that needs to be done in terms of design to kind of solidify all those things. And this is the meat of what we do, right? I mean, this is the, this phase. So in terms of how we go through the design process, I mean, some people may have heard words like design development or construction documents or things like that. That's from, the architecture world and sort of how it's spoken about on more commercial projects or sort of larger projects. I mean, we're moving, and I think Taylor said it kind of best, we're moving from big decisions to small decisions. So during that process, we're working through in a series of meetings. So we usually meet every 2 weeks with our clients. Most clients think that they want to meet more often than that, but the reality of having to make those decisions sets in, and the reality of everybody's schedule sets in. So every week is actually really, really often, and it doesn't give us enough time behind the scenes to actually do work in between. So we'll meet every 2 weeks and we'll kind of work through, whether it's working through a series of spaces. We always start off with the toughest ones, the ones that have the most stuff. So kitchens and bathrooms have the most stuff in them. So we need to get that. We work live. That's something unique that we do with our clients. So we don't make static presentations where they're PDFs that we send. We actually do live Zooms with our clients or sit there together in person, but work on a computer screen or a big screen where we're actually flying through our model. We're looking at our live drawings. And that way, when someone says, well, what if we made the bedroom 5 feet bigger? We can just try it live and show why that does or doesn't work or work things together. So it's very collaborative. But, the funnel starts to get narrower and narrower as you go further along in the process. When you're 10 meetings in, you don't want to be saying, what if we made the bathroom a totally different shape and turned it and put it in another part of the house? We want to not be there. So we also, we're full service. So we do everything. So we're ushering our clients through picking out absolutely everything. So all the fixtures, we lay out all the HVAC, everything. We go with our clients to the showrooms. We don't send them on their own. We actually go with them. We have this massive spreadsheet that we work together with all these tabs where we work together at filling everything in. That is really important. If a client picks this sink versus that sink and they're just on their own doing it and we don't know they changed it, or the sink actually doesn't fit in the vanity, disaster. So we're, because we're full service, we do absolutely everything. So our drawings at the end of our process will include everything up to and including the knob on the cabinet, the hinge, where the toilet paper holder goes and what size it is. We're down in the weeds. The idea is if we create all of that and we take all the time to figure that out, then when we hand it over to the contractor, they don't have to ask a million questions. So when we're in the heat of battle of construction, the contractor isn't saying, we need all the tile selections by next week. We're like, no problem. It's already been selected. It was selected 4 months ago. It helps with lead time. It helps with stress during construction. And the inevitable surprises that come up in renovation are a lot easier to deal with because we've already solved all the knowns and we're just dealing with the unknowns. It's a heavier lift. And I'll just say, it is more expensive. I'll just say that, to have us to do all that work. But in the end, we believe that it's the way to get the best value from the types of projects we do, which are very intricate and complicated renovations in a very tight urban environment.
One of the things I appreciate about what Marilyn just said is the key word is time. We are oftentimes able to do things very quickly, but we're also sometimes the benefit of having us sit down and chew on something for a while to figure out a design problem is really critical. And we chew on them. I think all of us do. And we work things upside down, sideways, backwards, flip pages around, try and get to a solution or a design that complements what the homeowner is trying to achieve. It's not just about us. It's really about our
Yeah, it's
clients.
very little about us.
It doesn't really matter. And so then and so I'd add to that, we do the full service stuff too, but we also now do interiors. So we're like full turnkey
Full
from
service.
foundations through curtain trims. So we're also doing furniture plans during that design process so that if there are things with long lead times, if there's custom upholstery, we're, making sure the rugs fit, all of those things are kind of happening simultaneously. And so for folks who want it, like it's a real turnkey service. So you can start with us and literally finish with us as we're putting the paintings on the walls. For those of us who are enthusiastic about making sure that the clients have all of the things that they want where they want them, it's a really great opportunity to have kind of one point person be that guide that kind of helps through that process.
Yeah, I would say our process is quite different. In my community, we are very builder led. So I think in a lot of maybe bigger cities, it can be architect led, where people naturally tell their friends, go find your architect first. In our area, it is traditionally go find your builder first. And that's in custom homes, but not luxury homes. So in my business, we're kind of in between taking that huge step into luxury homes, which, yes, they look for the architect first, which I love, of course. It's what I've been working toward. But there are a lot of great projects that are builder led. And I started my business in some turmoil. I had to work and I had to make money. And it was 2008, and there was not a lot of money to be had in the architecture world. So I took what work I could get, and that work was working with builders. Builders would bring their clients to me, and we developed a process that to this day still works really well. The builder is more in charge of the client. They're involved in every meeting. And then what we get to do is a lot of times the fun part, we design the building. And then when the building's done, we hand it over to the contractor. Contractor and owner go off, make their own decisions, make their own mistakes, and we are not involved anymore. We get paid well for the work that we do, and sometimes it's fun to get a project in and get it out in 2 months instead of 2 years. So that is one part of our business that I like, and we'll talk to some of those people during our interviews. They do screw it up sometimes, and it makes me very sad because I do end up seeing it, getting invited over an opening party or something, and I'm like, oh, that is not what we had in mind. But they're happy, and we keep saying it's their home. We're trying to get them to what they love. The other side of our business is more traditional, like your guys's. It's probably 70% of our business is full service architecture. What we do differently, though, is we do a lot of the selections and work during construction, which I think maybe is not ideal. It's just how it works here. We find that our clients are eager to break ground. And for us, new construction, it's literally breaking ground. And so we have a lot of time during foundation and framing. We have months and months during foundation and framing. So that's when we make a lot of those decisions. And sometimes it's useful because you can walk around during framing and feel the space instead of me telling them what it's going to feel like or looking at it on a 3D model. We can actually walk in the space and say, can you imagine this 5-foot chandelier in this space and it's going to hang like this high? And they get like super excited, or they're like, no, that's terrible. And what, at least we know. The other thing, Marilyn, when you said you do live changes, you would have to kidnap me to make me do live changes in front of a client.
I love it.
And I don't know if it's maybe because I have staff, a lot of us meet. And so sometimes in meetings, there are a lot of ideas thrown out that don't always work. And my fear is that a client's going to get super excited about something we say, oh, what about this? And they get super excited. And then I'm the one that has to go and say, yeah, that didn't work. We can't do that for X, Y, and Z.
I'm glad you brought that up because there is definitely, I've learned the hard way, what kinds of changes that are appropriate to make during a meeting and what changes are not appropriate to make.
Right.
So I have a question because it's come up in everybody's conversation. How many of us are building a 3D model in some way, shape, or form during the design process that gets shown or used during construction documents or design, working with clients? Is everybody doing that?
Yeah, we do that from the very beginning.
We do it from day one as well. I just will caveat, and I think we should talk about representation and AI and virtual fly-throughs and stuff, because a lot of that stuff is really, super relevant these days. We create partial models showing crucial spaces. So we don't create, we're not modeling, the bedroom. It's just a room with windows in it. We're not modeling necessarily those spaces. But I also think that something that can happen with owners is that because imagery is so easy to generate these days with a prompt in Midjourney or whatever, that then they think that it's that easy for us to do it as well. So, what's really important is to say that prompt in Midjourney or whatever you're using is super cool and interesting, but you look at that and you're like, none of this is physically possible. Gravity apparently doesn't exist. Code doesn't exist. So those are also dangerous things. So people think we can do it really fast, and they think that whatever it is doable. And when we're making models, and I'm sure this is the same for you guys, we're actually thinking about, okay, well, this is how wide the trim is. So I can't put the vanity there because then the trim is going to hit the vanity or the door's not going to open or whatever. And that's not happening in those AI images at all.
I mean, I think from our perspective, it's a really helpful tool, but it's 100%. Not an end in and of itself. My goal is not to provide a 3D rendering of every surface that we've created in a project. That would be a waste of everybody's time. And it actually it takes a lot of time to generate those things. It's not a snap fingers, push a button, and the whole thing renders with the right sunlight, and you can see exactly how it's going to look. We're not there yet. We may be at some point, but we're just not there yet. So I think it's important for folks to realize that we want to give you the critical views and the critical pieces so that you get a sense of what is happening in your project. But it's not easy to just turn around and say, oh, can you look at this wall with the 3 outlets on it? It takes a little more time than that.
Yeah, and I think, as we kind of talk about the next and final phase of the process here, which is actually building it, we've kind of already touched on a lot of it. And I think, I just want to point out, Sheri, you're mentioning a really different process where you're picking things out during construction, and Taylor and I are picking them out beforehand, sort of roughly. Both of those are great. Both of those have pluses and minuses. Both of those might,
for sure.
And then they're also rooted in the personality of the owner and what works for them, their schedule, and also the region. So Sheri, you brought up a couple times, in your area, XYZ has to be done a certain way. And I would say with my practice in Lancaster, PA and Boston, very different.
Totally
building
different.
cultures.
Yes.
We're much more builder driven in Lancaster, much more so when you're talking about that stuff, I'm yeah, I recognize that. And I'm learning that because my practice has been in Boston for a lot longer. So, and what's fun is that the builders in Lancaster are oh, that's, I've never worked that way. That's cool. Or, oh, I'm not sure about that or whatever, but there's interesting conversations coming of it. So I think that nothing here is necessarily wrong. It's just tailored and to the situation, to the owner, to the project, to the region, and that's why working with a local professional is so important, so that you're getting all that local knowledge.
So moving on to construction then. I think it'd be interesting to talk about how you work with the client specifically during construction and communication, and how you work with the contractor and how all of that kind of meshes together.
I just came in hot from a meeting. You want me to go?
Yeah, that's top of mind for you. Go
I'm
for it.
like screeching into the parking lot coming off we call it. So here's another, we're going to do a whole show on like dictionary terms. So
Yes, we do.
because
We
I
should do
think
that.
people throw terms around, and I mean, I didn't know what half this stuff was, but OAC meetings, owner, architect, and contractor meetings, we have them pretty much every week during construction. Sometimes not, but most of the time every week during construction. And so we are in communication with the owners, we're in communication with the contractors. And while we have these meetings once a week, we're probably talking to the contractors every day on the backside of that. So there's a whole lot of, or the clients, like it's not, we try and bundle it all into those meetings because it's more
Wouldn't that
efficient
be
for everybody,
nice?
but it doesn't really happen. And so we're working through that during construction. If there's, especially in renovations, you could open up a wall and find dead cats, which has happened, brown recluse. There's all sorts of
Raccoons.
stuff. You can find
Mhm,
raccoons.
yeah.
There's that opportunity to sort of solve problems when they show up on a site, which is inevitable, is really important for us to be able to be helpful for that. But and to sort of soothe nerves. I mean, I tell clients a lot, if you don't see me panicking, you don't need to panic. We're all good. And then for us too, that involves us approving pay applications. So when the contractor submits an invoice to the client, we can be like, okay, hold on, wait a second. I would love to ask a question about, the lighting switches. We spec'd dimmers. It looks like here there's no dimmers. We need to be making sure that bid included those dimmers. Can we have a conversation about that? So we're sort of playing the heavy sometimes for the owner when we're having these conversations about invoices on the sort of backside of that on a periodic basis. So that helps us kind of keep an eye on where things are schedule wise and dollar wise, and also helps us kind of solve problems as they come up in the field. So that's nutshell our construction. I don't know that there's any way to it's messy, but construction's messy.
It is messy, and I would say ours is very similar. And one thing that we do that I'm really, really serious about is meeting minutes for those weekly meetings. So I have had multiple, maybe even I can count on two hands, the number of clients who have given us referrals or good references. And the first thing they said was our meeting minutes.
Your meeting minutes are aspirational for me, Marilyn. Aspirational.
So, I mean, I would like to say good designer, good manager of the process, really good with clients, like hoping my clients say that, but they apparently also say meeting minutes. So that is so fundamental to how we operate. And those meeting minutes and you know where I learned how to do good construction project meeting minutes? When I was a contractor. I actually came up through the ranks on the contractor side before I was an architect. So worked in the field as a laborer. They soon figured out I had better uses. So learn project management, estimating, and all of that. And that's where I learned how to keep good meeting minutes for construction. So if the contractor offers to keep the minutes, I say, no thanks, we'll do it. Whoso therefore controls the minutes controls the narrative of the project.
That's right.
And so anyway, that's an important ad. But during construction, in renovations, you're opening the wall, you're finding raccoons, whatever. But a big part of what we do is not just the technical stuff, like, oh my gosh, something we need to change, something, whatever. The other thing we do is psychological. So we are there, as Taylor's saying, not to panic, but construction is really confusing and really overwhelming. And for our clients, they're seeing their home completely torn to pieces in front of their eyes and like nothing. Will this ever go back? What's happening here? And so that's a huge role that we play. And good contractors, by the way, if a contractor says, we don't want the architect anywhere near construction,
Ooh, red
Red
flag.
flag.
Red flag.
Absolutely. So many times.
Because good contractors want good architects around. It's a team. Right, Sheri?
Yes, I have had that so many times and one time in particular, something happened on site. They needed a retaining wall where we didn't think they would need a retaining wall. Things like that happen. And so the client comes to me and he's like, oh, well, yeah, Bob, the builder, said that, maybe we could reduce your CA fee to pay for the wall. And I'm like,
no.
and I said, we can negotiate that because I do all of my services on a sliding scale and I try to serve people where they are and what they need from me. But I said, you go home tonight and you think about the fact that the very first thing that came up as a problem, the contractor's idea is, let's get rid of the third party, which is just incredible. So they ended up not getting rid of me, but I think we do all the same things you guys do: weekly visits, meetings, pay. Some clients want us to do pay requests, some don't. So we kind of play that as it goes.
Yeah, same with us.
For those of you that don't know what CA is, it is construction administration, which clients sometimes get confused thinking we are doing the construction, but we're not. We are observing, essentially observing to make sure that your project is being built the way that we designed it and specified it.
But we're also not QA QC. So if we go into defining CA, yeah, like it's really complex, but yeah, that should be said as well. We're not out there with a tape measure. You know, we are providing services, the contractor's providing the product, which is the building.
And more nuanced, as in the psychology side, like Marilyn said, is for homeowners to always know that the architect is your advocate. And if you get into a project where the architect ends up being a little too buddy with the contractor and is, stepping outside to smoke with them and whatever, that's not appropriate. The architect is paid by you. You have a contract with the architect and the architect is your advocate. So make sure that's how that's going down.
And I would say that sort of circles back to the initial contractor selection process. Having a team and if possible, a team that's worked together before is good. It doesn't mean that the architect isn't the owner's advocate, because that's true. But the ways to solve problems, it's a lot easier if there's a team that's worked together before and knows how to negotiate, knows how to have tough conversations. And if there's a problem, we want to go to our clients with a solution. We don't want to go to them with a question that they have to answer. We want to come and say, okay, here's what this is. And that requires us having conversations with the contractor as well. So that team approach, I think, is really important. And that gets established at the very beginning of a project, really.
Absolutely. And that's why when we're thinking about, red flags or people to work with or whatever, people who are collaborative and understanding that the role of the GC and the role of the architect are distinct and important. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of overlap, but, speaking of someone who's done both, there's a lot of overlap, but they are distinct. And you can't just get rid of the architect, as Sheri was just telling that story. Or you can, but there will be consequences. The work that the architect was doing is either going to be left undone or done by someone who's not as qualified.
Or done by the owner.
Yeah, exactly, which is not ideal. So, I think as we contemplate these sort of different ways we do things, like I think it'd be helpful for our listeners to talk about what is a homeowner to do next? Like, okay, Sheri does it this way, Taylor does it this way, Marilyn does it this way. What does my region do? How do I do this? What do I do? What comes next? How do I know what I need? I mean, these are the questions we answer all the time.
We answer those questions in our first meeting that I talked about at the beginning of this. That first meeting, that's a meet and greet. Be sure that you are open about what you don't know. I have a lot of clients that are, they are super producers and they are high earners and they are brilliant people, but they don't know anything about construction. And you don't need to know anything about construction. That's our role. And to be open about that and just say, I haven't done this before. I really would like your guidance in finding a contractor, or I have a contractor. He's my brother-in-law. And, whatever the situation is, be open with us. But I think that your first good step is probably to meet with an architect or two to find out how they work and see what resonates with you. They may say some things that you don't even know to ask.
I think that's really good. And we also do those initial meetings. And what I tell owners is this is not a sales meeting. I am not trying to sell you my services. I'm going to tell you all about what I offer, But one of my main driving goals in that meeting, and also just sort of in my life and how I'm built, is I want to help people figure out the best way to achieve their project. If in that meeting we can discern, like, is that us? Well, many times it's actually not. So we'll spend some time talking about, here are 3 other ways you could execute this project, or you can move forward. It doesn't involve us. That's fine. I don't care. Here's some other names, or here's some other, I'm not there to just sell them on that they have to work with us, or that they have to shoehorn their project into my process if it's not a good fit. And at this point in my career, I can tell if it's going to be a good fit or not, to say, hey, what you guys are describing is a great fit for how we work. And I would love to work with you on this project. And here's more about how we do that. But our goal when I talk to clients, and I do consultations, by the way, all the time. And those consultations are not about, it's not a lead funnel for me to get work. It's about me helping people strategize about the best way to get their questions answered. And I think that the 3 of us are pretty passionate about that. That is why we're doing this podcast in large part, because we're passionate about people finding what works for them, not necessarily just, you must work with us and do it our way.
We love to think that we're all brilliant and can do everything all the time. But we're probably all old enough to know that we can't do everything. And so I think it's important to note that not every architect is going to be the right fit. And it's okay to talk to several. It's okay to find that right. We feel that way. You should feel that way too as a homeowner. It's okay that it's not the right fit. I take no offense.
Yes.
And it's better to sort that out at the outset. And if it's, sometimes it's a question of things like timing. Like, do you need something really quickly and the firm can't get to it? They've got a backlog. Is it something that requires a special expertise that I don't have? We wouldn't be the right fit for that. So those conversations, those early conversations are so important, but it's also, I think, as an owner, important to come in and really kind of like we do with that RFQ. Is it important for the contractor to feed the dog during the process? What are the most important things to you about this project? Is it a result? Is it what you want to end up with? Is it a time frame? Is it a budget? Is it a particular look or a style or something? But figure out kind of what your priorities are, and that will help guide that conversation with those architects so that both of you can go through a kind of discernment process to figure out if it's an alignment.
Through this whole session here, we've talked about a lot of different things. Different from each other. It doesn't mean it's wrong, right? So that one is right and one is wrong, but one might be right or wrong for the context. So the process that works really well in super intense renovations in downtown Boston doesn't necessarily work the same way for projects in the Cincinnati area for Sheri, right? So that doesn't mean that either one of us is wrong. So it's all about finding that right fit. Different isn't. Different's okay. That's why there's a variety of people offering services, right?
And I guess the other thing I would suggest that folks do is think about what you need. We are going to advocate for folks using architects. And I think that's an important distinction.
That's our bias.
That's our bias. We are going to go into that with that bias. We are architects. We advocate for people using architects. There may be a fit where it's not the right thing for an architect, and that's okay too. But you don't be afraid to call us and ask us that. I refer people to other folks all the time, whether it's a contractor or a draftsperson that might be a better fit for that particular project. And so we believe that architects are great fits for most projects, but sometimes they aren't. So that's okay too.
That's okay too.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on Home the Second Story. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I actually enjoyed it a lot, to be perfectly honest. But anyway, for more inspiring homeowner stories and tips, we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Home, the Second Story podcast. Feel free to share this episode with a friend. Contact information for all 3 of our architects are in our show notes. And don't miss future episodes. Follow or subscribe to our show for free in Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now.